Okay. The Bachram are going back to yeshiva today. So, have to keep up the learning. They're going to keep it up. I'm going to zoom in. Okay. Today we're going to start at the Mishnah on Samach Chesem Beis. Yeah, 68. Thank Hashem. We're able to learn Torah every day, and this possible learning we should have the Beis Hamikdash immediately. Learning Lili Nishma, Safat al Baspark, Benjamin, and Misalas have been Betzian, and also for Shem, I've been Betzara. Now I get to big it's a prayer. Okay.
Amen.
Okay. Meicher Sasada, the Mishnah says. Someone sells a field. That's a common phrase in this parak. Meicher Sasada, Meicher Sabayas. Someone sells a field. Machar Savanim Shem L'Tzarka. He sells the stones that are necessary for the field, which we're going to see in the Gemara what stones they are. So in other words, even though the person's not buying stones, but because he's buying the field, the stones are coming along. It's just part of it. We had quoted Reb Meir's opinion that if someone buys something, he buys everything, all the utensils together with it. We're gonna have to figure out what would be Reb Meir's opinion here, because Reb Meir is much more inclusive in the sale, and the Rabbanan are less inclusive. So the Gemara is going to discuss that. Also, there are reeds in the field that are necessary for the field. The Gemara is going to explain that these are reeds that hold up the vines, because the grapes, the vines, it's not really a tree. The vines are much thinner than a tree, so it hangs down, and the grapes will weigh it down. So you need, what's it called? The trestle. What's it called? The things that hold up the grapes. Trellis. So the trellis. You need these sticks that hold up the vines, so that the fruit don't rest on the ground. They'll rot on the ground. Trellis. Also selling the grain that's attached to the ground. We're going to see what the chiddush is over there in the Gemara. Beschita sakanem shipchusa mi beis reiva. What is chita sakanem? It's some sort of is it a growth of sticks? Is it how do they translate it there? Thicket of reeds. Thicket of reeds. How do they translate it by you? Chita sakanem. If it's less than a beis reiva. Now, how big is a beis reiva? It's reiva is probably a quarter of a kav, right? Which is that area. How big is that area? Doesn't say. Okay. But a quarter kav of reeds? No, it must mean a quarter kav. Less than a quarter kav. And how big is a quarter kav? The way that they would measure land in those days is that how much seed could be planted in that land. So they would measure it. A kav is a size of 24 eggs. So they would measure it by that amount of seed could be planted in such and such an area. Okay, so if this thicket is size or is less than a beis reiva in that area, then it's sold together with the field. The shemira is a type of hut, but it's probably a reed hut. Now, if it's how do they translate it there? A watchman's hut. A watchman's hut. Now, if it's attached to the ground, if it's like cemented to the ground, then remember Houdini. There was one time he couldn't pick the lock, so they felt the door was open. That was the victim. So okay. So if it's not attached to the ground, then it's sold together with the field. Now, this seems like counterintuitive. If it's attached, it should be more sold, right? The answer is that if it's plastered or tit, it's probably cemented. If it's cemented, then it's more significant, and then it's not sold. It's sort of like the house. When you sell a courtyard, well, sell a courtyard, you sell it by the house also. But if you sell a field, you don't sell the house with it, right? So here also, you're selling the field. You don't sell the house with it. This is a carob tree that's not grafted. Apparently, there's different types of carobs, and in order to get the fruit, they would have to graft it. So this was that. Once it's grafted, then it's already significant, and that would be sold independently. But this is a carob tree that's not grafted, so it just goes along with the sale of the field. Psulas hashikma. Psulas hashikma is the sycamore tree before it's been cut down the first time, because what they would do is they would cut down the sycamore tree, and then it would grow back thicker, right? They would cut it down once, and then it would grow back. So I guess the first time it's not so significant. The second time is more significant. So that's why it's sold together with the field. Now we go to the what's not sold. Everything so far was yes sold. The stones that are not necessary for the work of the field. And not the reeds in the vineyard that aren't needed for the trellis. Not the grain that's already been harvested. Let's see what that is. Does it mean really harvested? Because there's no chiddush there. What did the Gemara say? Oh yeah, even though it still needs the ground to dry, the Gemara is going to say, if he says to the person, that I'm selling you everything in the field, all inclusive, right? As is. So everything is sold. With the exception, those things that are so significant that they aren't sold, right? I think when we went back to those pits and things that are not sold together with the house, I think he said even kol masha b'seicha, I think the pits were still not sold. Remember that? Yeah, so it leaves that out. Yeah. Okay. Benkach, whatever the case is, even if he says this, if the thicket of reeds is so big that it's a beis reva, the size of a quarter cup, and not the house. Yeah, exactly like you said. If it's a watchman's hut that is cemented, the grafted carob tree. Apparently, they would graft wild carob with cultivated carob, make it get the better fruit. Stronger tree with the better fruit. That's the way they would do it. That's the grafts today are done that. Get the better roots that don't freeze in the winter, and all of those things. They're better with repelling bugs or whatever. And then but the fruit's no good, so you have to graft onto it a branch that gives a better fruit. Right? Asking if you're not allowed to graft. I think because it's the same tree, you're allowed to. Because it's the same variety, same species, you're allowed to. I think that's the explanation. You're not allowed to graft two different trees. Okay. So the charav amorkav le'esad lashikma, and this is not the second growth of the sycamore tree. Okay. Let's go to the Gemara and Samach Tes 69a on the top. What are the stones that are necessary for the field? Over here, it's translated Avnei Da'achva. These are stones that hold the bundles down. Apparently, when they would put the wheat down, it could blow away. So they would put stones on them to weigh it down so that it should dry. I think the wheat would dry in the field, but they would have to hold it there. because the more it dries, the lighter it gets, and then it would blow away. So they would put stones on top that would hold it down to dry. Ula Amar, so those are stones that are necessary for the field, and that's why they're sold together with the field. Ula says, Havana Masidurs together. These are stones that are arranged to be a fence for the field. Now, the emphasis here is that it's arranged. The problem is, Vatani Rabchia, Havanam Tziburs together. But Rabchia taught in a brisa that they don't need to be arranged, even if it's just a pile of stones, that you can later arrange it. That's also sold together with the field. So a pile of stones, according to Rabchia, would be sold together with the field. And according to Ula, it's not just a pile of stones. It needs to be arranged. It's not cemented. You could arrange the stones without cementing them, just putting them in a arrangement that will later be a fence. After you put the plaster and all of that in the cementing. So, but we have a contradiction between Reb Chia and the Mishnah. Reb Chia says that it needs to be, that even if it's piled, it's sold. It's a pile of stones, it's sold. And according to the Mishnah, it needs to be arranged. So the Gemara answers the problem with Tani Sidura is just teach Reb Chia's brisa that it means that it was arranged. It says piled, but it doesn't mean piled just like a big heap. It means piled up in an arrangement for the wall, the fence around the field. And we go back to explain what we learned in the Gemara, what we learned in this Gemara before, that we have a discussion between Hacher Targimo, that means in Babylonia, versus Ula. What are the stones that are necessary for the field? So Hacher Targimo Abnei Dachba. Here it was taught Abnei Dachba, the stones that are used to hold down the bundles of wheat. L'Rab Meir, okay, we jump into that sugya that we mentioned before, which really is a Gemara later, that if someone sells a vineyard, he sells with it all utensils of the vineyard, everything that's necessary for the vineyard, which means Rab Meir is much more inclusive than the Rabbanan. So what would Rab Meir be including here that the Rabbanan are not including? So Rab Meir, the Misaknan, Afagav B'lei Machtan. Misaknan means that they're chiseled. How do they translate Misaknan? Look on prepared. Prepared is good. Even though if they're prepared, even though they haven't been placed on the grain, it's already considered sold, because according to Reb Meir, it's much more inclusive. Even if it's not being used now, just the fact that it's able to be used, that's already considered sold. And l'Rabbanan, according to the Rabbanan that are less inclusive in the sale, so for them it has to be udemachtan, it had to be placed on the grain, and then it would be considered sold. That's considered necessary for the field because it's already it's already being used. Then it's sold together with the field, not if it's able to be used. Yeah, I'm not sure if it has to do with selling with a better eye. I think Reb Meir, his understanding is that all utensils of a field would get sold together with the field, like tractors and all that. When you sell a field, you sell it like that. Maybe it's associated with Rabbi Akiva. I mean, it is his teacher. It's a good point. Ula damar Havana Masidurs together. According to Ula, that says that what stones are sold together with the field. There's the stones that are arranged for a fence. L'Rameir de Mesakna Nafal Sidron. According to Reb Meir, once they've been prepared, even though they haven't been arranged, the Rabbanan the Sidron, according to Rabbanan, only if they've been arranged, that's when it would be sold together with a what do you want, a seltzer? Okay. They put out a spread of food here for the Bachram that they've been joining us over the summer. So, and they're going back to yeshiva. So remember the good food that they had at the Daf Yomi Warriors. Okay. The reeds that are in the vineyard that are necessary for the vineyard, the trellis So used for the trellis. It says, what do you do with reeds? Amri de Rabbi Yana, it was said in Yeshiva Rabbana, they're split. They're probably split just on the top, but they're able to, because of that split, they're able to hold up a branch, like a fork. It would hold up branches, so it doesn't hang on the ground. Okay, so now back to our Gemara. This is what the Gemara is doing here. Every piece of this, the Gemara is going to say, well, according to Reb Meir, how is it more inclusive, and according to the Rabbanan, how is it less inclusive? Even though we didn't actually learn the mission of Reb Meir yet, but we know about it. So Reb Meir, the Meshayfan afagav le'mukman. According to Reb Meir, Meshayfan I think means sanded or peeled down, even though they haven't been placed. And the Rabbanan, the mukman, according to the Rabbanan, only if they've actually been placed. In other words, they're in use. You're using them already as a trellis. That's when it's going to be sold. The grain that's attached to the ground. So what's the chiddush of that? If it's attached to the ground, it's sold together with the ground. The Gemara says, "Afagav the matoi lemechtzad." Even though it's reached, the word matoi means to reach. Chassidus is a concept. Mati v'lei mati. It's reaching or not reaching. So Mati, it's reached the time of harvesting. So even though it's reached the time of harvesting, and you would say that really it's not necessary to be attached to the ground anymore. But no, the fact that it is attached to the ground, it still is sold with the field. The thicket of reeds that's less than a reva, a quarter of a kav, afagav dalimi, it's still sold together with the field, even though it's very strong, very thick, because it's not big enough, so it's sold together with the field. It's not significant enough to be an independent sale. Also, this watchman's hut that's not cemented, even though it's not permanent in the ground, it's still sold together with the ground. I guess because it's movable. The chiddush is that even though it's movable, because the watchman's hut could be moved from one place to another, but nevertheless, it's still sold together with the ground. Yeah, there's two sides to that. Because on one hand, you would say, oh, if it's not movable, then it's more significant and it should be sold independently. On the other hand, if it is movable, then we'll say maybe it's not permanent for the field. So it shouldn't be sold for the field. Yeah, so both of those together. We spoke about the carob tree that hasn't been grafted, and also the young sycamore tree. Afagav dalim, even though they're very thick, they're very strong, but nevertheless they're still sold together. They're not significant enough, I guess, based on their value. The carob tree doesn't give enough fruit because it hasn't been grafted. And the sycamore tree isn't thick enough, the wood isn't thick enough. So that's why it's sold together with the field. But you don't sell the stones that are not necessary for the field. According to Reb Meir, this would be, why is it not sold? Reb Meir sells everything together with the field. He says, no, it hasn't even been prepared. It happens to be in the field, but it's not prepared to be able to hold as like a weight. It's not. I'm not sure exactly how they would prepare it, but they would probably chisel it down so that it'd be able to be used as a weight that go on the grain. The Rabbanan, according to the Rabbanan, even if it was prepared, but if it wasn't placed on top of the grain, and then it won't be sold. Together, and according to Ula, that says that what are the stones that are necessary for the field or the stones that are not necessary for the field that are not sold, right? Which ones are those? He says that's the stones that are necessary are the ones that are arranged as a wall. That's sold together with the field as a fence. So the Reb Meir, according to Reb Meir, that sells everything together with the field. So then over here it would have to be really not part of the field. It wasn't even prepared to be stones for a wall. According to the Rabbanan, even if it was prepared, it's still not sold because it wasn't arranged in an arrangement of a fence around the field. And not the reeds that are in the field that aren't necessary for the trellis. And according to Reb Meir, then they have to be so not ready that they haven't even been sanded. It's probably just twigs. The Rabbanan Mukman, and according to the Rabbanan, even if they're sanded, but if they weren't placed in the field, weren't placed in their positions, then they would not be sold. And not the grain that's detached from the ground, even though it needs the ground to still dry out. Nevertheless, it's not sold together with it because it's been detached. It's considered these movable things that aren't sold. The produce is not sold together with the land. And not the thicket. Once it's the thicket of reeds, once it's the size of Beis Reva, the Katini, and even though they're very small. Amr Chia Barabba, Amr Rabbi Yechanan. Chia Barabba says the name of Rabbi Yechanan. We just gave a ratio of reeds to the size of reeds that would not be sold. Once it's a Beis Reva, once it's a quarter kav, then that amount of reeds would not be sold because that would be too significant to be just included in the sale of land. That would need to get its own sale. So comes along Rav Chia Barabba, who's a famous student of Rabbi Yechanan, and he says in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, says Leichitz sakanim belvad. It's not only the thicket of reeds, but even if it would be a small row of spices, if it has its own name, its own title, we're about to see, so that's not going to be sold together with the field. They have to call it the roses of so and so. Varda is a rose, right? Is that how they translate it? Rose? Roses? Or do they just call it spices? We're talking about spices. Fragrant herbs. That's what they're calling it. Fragrant herbs. Okay. In modern Hebrew, Varda is a rose. Yeah. It's a woman's name. A rose. Right, or Varda. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So what we're learning over here is that even though the roses are not the size, even though the roses are not the size of a quarter kav, but that's not significant. By reeds, I needed a quarter kav. By roses, I just need one small row, and that's enough. So there's like a ratio of value of how the size. At what size would it have that significant value? So if it's reeds, then it would be a quarter kav. If it's roses, then it would be a smaller row. It doesn't need to be the same size. And not the watchman's house, which is made with cement. Even though it's attached to the ground. So you would say, oh, it's attached to the ground. For sure, it's sold together with the ground. Where it says, no, because it's significant, so it needs to get its own sale. Now there's a parentheses here, talking about the grafted carob tree and the mature sycamore tree. Even if they're considered small, but nevertheless they're still not sold together with the field. Boy, Rabbi Lazar has a question. Malbeina shel psachim mao. Now, yeah, I wonder how they explain it over there. Apparently, this is like a door frame. And the Gemara is asking, Rabbi Lazar is asking, is a door frame sold together with the field?
On the top, it says the door stops.
Door stops.
Yeah, but then in the notes it explains that the frame positions.
Why would we suggest? Why would we think that maybe a door frame isn't sold together with the field? But a door frame or what? Of what? Is this a house? The house is not sold together with the field. Let me see what it says. What happened to the batteries are up?
Yeah, almost.
The Shabbos Gemara. Oh, if one sells a house, okay, we're not dealing with the field anymore. Okay, we're done with the field. Now, if someone sells a house, the question is, does he sell the door frame?
I think yes, that one previously, he said with the mag, the door was sold, and the question was on the lock.
Right.
So if we, halach is kind of, it's a, what do you call it? Kal v'chomer, if the door automatically went with the house, of course, the door frame.
The way they're putting it here is that these are moldings on the top and bottom and side of the doorways, which the door strikes when it's closed. Which is, do we say that since they are not such a vital part of the doorway, they are not sold with the house?
No, molding's not the door frame. Molding's not the door. Molding is what you put around the door frame for.
Yeah.
But that's what doesn't.
I think what they mean is that not you don't, the door would function without it.
Or just swing to the side. You would not be able to lock it with the frame.
Yeah, maybe
No,
it's.
no.
Did they have? Yeah, they had doors that swung both ways back then.
Yeah, but they don't
Watch out.
But they don't have the door stops. This
Right.
says door stop.
Right. Well, you would lock it with the lock, and then it would stop.
Like wooden.
Okay. So the Gemara's question is like this: Me, Amrina, I'm sorry. If it's attached with cement, then of course it's sold. Because it's attached. Our question is, that it's held on with pegs. It's not attached well. So then, do we say that those moldings come off and they're not sold together with the house? Where it says teku. Reb Zera is a question. Well, what about the frame on the window? It's probably the window sill. It may have had a fancy piece that was used as a windowsill. Do we say that it's just decorative? Or do we say that since it's attached and it's sold together, so teku? We leave that as a question. So this is a question from Rabbi Lazar. We had a question from Reb Zera. Now we go to Reb Zera's student, Reb Yirmiyah. Reb Yirmiyah has a question. Reb Yirmiyah is famous for his questions. Let's say the bed frame also has something around the legs of the bed frame, some decorative casing. Anything that's removable is not a question because it's removable. Our question is if it's not removable. Yeah.
It has of the blocks that are underneath the legs.
Blocks that are under the, yeah, but then read what it says. It can't be removed. No, not the notes, just the actual text. Question is only when it's not removable. Yeah, talking about you're selling a bed now. Okay, to this also the Gemara says teku. We're talking about the grafted carob tree and also the cypress tree.
What would they do back then? Someone had those things on their bed.
The question is when the guy comes to pick up the bed and the owner takes them off. He says, "No, I bought it with all those things." He says, "No, I never sold that."
So if this happened,
Yeah, what would Allah be? Question. What do you do in this teku? I think you do a mitzvah mechaber levaraya. If the seller is holding it, then it's hard to extract it from him until you can prove it. And if the buyer is holding it, then you can't extract it from him.
Well, if he didn't pay him yet till we showed up, they don't agree.
Right. Yeah.
Happens a lot with the offer up. You make a deal on the phone, become supposed to pay tuition. And then all of a sudden you say, well, wait a minute. In the picture it had this. Well, that wasn't included. It said this, we had that.
Oh, yeah.
So we ended up just deciding it was worth it. We bought it. And then in the end, we decided we didn't need it. We got this out.
Yeah, sometimes when you buy things online, the picture is different than the description. So you think you're getting all the decorations that come along with the, yeah. Okay. How do we know that these trees are not sold together with the field? To the extent that even if he says Kol ma shebesoicha, it's still not sold. Even if he says everything that's in it, it's still not sold together with the field. So Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav Yehuda says in the name of Rav, Rav is the first generation, Rav the second generation. Amira, the pasuk says V'yakum stay efer nasher b'machpelah, and the pasuk continues, and it says that this is Avram is buying the field of the Marsa Machpelah from Ephraim, and over there it says V'chol ha'etz asher b'chol gvulei saviv, and all the trees that are in the borders surrounding it, which means that trees are acquired together with the border. If you acquire the borders, you're acquiring the trees. The only thing is, that would only be trees that are necessary that the borders would contain it. In other words, that they're insignificant trees, that the only way to know that they were sold is because they happen to be in the borders. Misha tzarech legvul saviv, that's sold together with the field. Yatsu elu, that would be excluding significant trees that don't need the borders to be recognized that they're part of to recognize their location, because they're so significant that they're actually sold independent of the borders. Those aren't trees that come along. But because the Sadan Ashikma, the mature sycamore tree, and the grafted carob tree are so significant, so those are sold independently, not together with the borders. We're learning from this pasuk that the trees that the borders mark them off are sold together with the field. But trees that are sold independently of the borders are not sold together with the borders.
So if I remember, some trees.
Only the smaller trees were sold together with it. And maybe there were no big trees, it doesn't say.
Because they marked it off.
Because they marked it off, yeah.
So go back while you were on vacation. Why did what's his name, Banaha have to go into Marsa Pela to find out on top to mark out the grave? All he had to do was look into trees.
No, the trees were around the whole field.
The whole field,
Yeah.
not just
All the trees that were in the field, yeah. Rav Misharshi says, "Mikan lemitzarim min haTorah." This teaches us that if someone buys a field, he acquires also the trees that are growing along the border as well, according to the Torah. Yeah. Okay. Amar Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda says, "Hayman the Mazbin." Is it the Mazbin or Mezabin? Mezabin. Mezabin. Okay. Someone that sells. Mezabin is to sell. Mazbin is probably to buy. Mezabin. I don't know. Need the Aramaic grammar.
Please, it just sells or it buys also?
It means both. That's why it's very difficult to know if it's buying or selling. Here it's obvious, but Hayman the Mezabin Ara Lechavre, someone that's selling land to his friend, he has to write, Knilach, acquire to you, Diklin, the palm trees, Vitalin, that's the saplings, Behutzin, these are types of palm trees, Vitzitzin, it's probably supposed to be Vitzini, it's another type of palm tree that don't give fruit. Now the truth is that even if you don't write that, Kani, you acquire it, but nevertheless, that's what makes the document beautiful when you add in extra things. Okay. Yeah.
Right on it, better.
Amalei, if he says Aravadikli, I'm selling you land and palm trees, and the emphasis here is on the word and. Chazinan, so we have to take a look. Yes, dikli, if there are palm trees in the field, so you have leitre dikli. He has to give him an extra 2 palm trees. Amazing, because he says and. It's not including the ones. And let's say he doesn't have another 2. Vilesle, if he doesn't have Zavin leitre dikli, he has to go buy 2 palm trees to be able to supply for the sale that he just made. Be Meshabdi if he has, but they were they had a lien on them. So parkile dikli, he has to redeem them 2 palm trees to give to for the sale that he just made, where he said land and palm trees. Let's say he said ara bid dikli.
Because when you say I'm selling you this parcel and 2 palms, it doesn't necessarily mean the palms are growing. It's like I'm selling you 3 lots.
Right.
You know?
Exactly. But let's say he says ara bid dikli, the land with palm trees, then chazina niyas dikli. If there are palm trees there, then yoavle. Then he gives it to him. He lie, but if there are no palm trees there, mekachta, so then that's considered an invalid sale. Now, even though we say that usually there's no einay na b'karkais, usually there's no overcharging when it comes to property, but that's not the case when it comes to actually misrepresentation. When it comes to the price, true, you can charge a lot, even though it's not, maybe right now it's not worth it. But if it's misrepresented, then that's considered an invalid sale. Ara beidikli, a land of palm trees. Leslie dikli, if it doesn't have palm trees, it's still considered a sale, and the reason is the chazia ledikli kamerle, because he said a land of palm trees. That means that a land that's fit to grow palm trees. It's like a palm tree land. So you can, yeah, sure, go plant palm trees in here and it will grow. Huh? Not Legoland, yeah. Okay. Amalei levarmi dikla planya chazinan. No, levarmi dikla planya. If he says, I'm selling you the whole field, but I'm not selling you that palm tree. That's such and such a palm tree. Date palm. Chazina, then we take a look. If that's a very special palm tree, then shiri shari, yeah, he wanted to keep that for himself. If it's a bad palm tree, it's a koskin hanach, then for sure the better ones he didn't sell. What he meant to say was from that one and up, I'm not selling. Amalei bar milani, if he says besides for trees. So Ilani, if there are trees in the field, the bar milani, then he's leaving out the trees. Dikli, if there are palm trees in the field, then the bar midikli. When he said trees, even though he didn't say palm trees, but when palm trees could be called trees. If there's nothing else, what's it? Herring is a fish. Oh, the
Something with
some expression.
Yeah.
The makim sheinish, herring is a fish or something. I think that was the expression. Yeah. Yeah, when there's no one else, so herring is also considered a fish. So yeah, if they don't have, so this could be called a tree. It's a palm tree. It's actually more significant than a tree. Dias begufni, let's say there are grapevines in there, and he said besides for the trees. So what he meant to say was the bar megufni, besides for the grapevine. Ilani vegufni, let's say he said besides for the trees, but in the field there were trees and grapevines. What he meant to say was just the bar milani, only besides for the trees. The grapevines he wouldn't call trees if there are other trees there. Ilani vidikli, let's say there were trees and date palms. Then he said besides for the trees. Then it's just a bar milani besides for the trees, because when there's trees, he means trees. Otherwise, he would have said date palm. Gufni vidikli, let's say there's no trees. He said besides for the trees, but there's no trees. All there are date palms and grapevines. Which one did he mean when he said he's not selling the trees? Gemara says the bar migufni. Grapevines are more trees than date palms. It's in the expression. Amara.
Just remind me, when we learned previously the Gemara, or a Gemara, quite within the last couple of weeks, where the guy bought a field, but the tree wasn't included Was that specifically said the tree was included, or it was automatic?
If
that
if
was
it was
told
a
to-
significant tree, then it wouldn't have been included.
Well, we're learning that here, but what will we learn back there? Because I remember the answer said, I didn't sell you the tree. And
Right,
because
I
we were
don't
talking
remember.
about access to the tree, how do I say, once a year or twice a year, you have to go take fruits off, which is so
I think over there he said clearly besides the tree.
besides.
Rav says, "Kol she'oilin loy b'chevel havishir, kol she'ein loy b'chevel loy havishir." If the tree is that significant that people climb it with a rope to be able, because the dates are on top, you have to climb it. You have to climb up the tree to get it. There's no branches on the palm tree. You just have those palm fronds that go on the top. So you don't have any fruit that's low, that's down below. So you have to climb it up with the rope.
It's like to get the coconuts.
You got the coconut, right? You need the special shoes, whatever, and you have to climb up to be able to get it. Actually, I think the date palms are easier because they have like the branches growing all along. The whole tree is the branches. You know what I'm talking about? The coconut trees are smooth all the way up. I don't know if those things can hold you, those little guys. But whatever the case is, anything that's significant enough that you climb it, so that would be left out of a sale because that's so significant. And the Dayani Goyla Amri, but the Dayanim of the exile, which is Shmuel and Karna, that's the Gemara Sanhedrin, Naphtali, that you put together once. Kol Sha'ol Kaivshay Layabishir. If when the animals are plowing around the trees, they're able to go over the tree and it just like bends over. So then if they can bend it over, then that's an insignificant tree. That would not be left out. But anything that would block the yoke of the plowing animals, then Havishia that would be left over. Like Pligi, and there's really no argument between Shmuel and Rav, because Rav said you have to climb it up, and here he says if the yoke, Shmuel says the yoke. The difference is it depends. If we're dealing with palm trees, then you have to climb it, and habilani with other trees that are much smaller, then if the yoke can go over it, then that won't be sold. If the yoke can't go over it, then it's the yoke was because they would put sometimes two animals together, or they would have to think. Okay, let's leave it here. Okay, have a good day, everyone.
So we're not gonna see you guys in?
Yeah.